The acrid smell of burnt electronics and stale air filled Jack Bennet's nostrils as the breaching charges tore through the alien ship's hull. He felt a rush of hot air wash over him and the rest of his squad as they secured the entry point. "All right, Titans, you know the drill. Formation Alpha, stack up and go," Jack barked, taking point with his blaster rifle at the ready. The Titans, Earth's elite special forces, moved in practiced unison. His heart hammered like a drum in his chest, a mix of adrenaline and anticipation. 20 years they'd waited for this moment, 20 years since the first alien ship had warped into orbit, a gargantuan monstrosity of seemingly organic design that dwarfed the hastily assembled human defense fleet. The aliens had hung there, silent and ominous. Radio chatter crackled to life across the globe as world leaders frantically attempted to communicate, to establish some semblance of understanding. Their signals remained unanswered. For 2 decades, the alien vessel orbited like a macabre monument to humanity's insignificance. The world changed. United in the face of an existential threat, borders dissolved, and humanity's finest worked tirelessly to develop countermeasures to whatever the aliens might throw at them. Jack and his squad, the Titans, were the culmination of that effort, genetically enhanced, tactically brilliant, and armed with weaponry that fused the most cutting-edge human tech with reverse-engineered alien tech salvaged from scout ships down in the early years. Now, here they were. Humanity was taking the fight to the enemy. The Titans moved with ruthless efficiency, their heavy armor making a dull thud on the alien vessel's chitinous floors. It felt strangely soft beneath their boots, almost yielding. Weird Emily Hawk Johnson, the squad sniper, muttered over comms, tracing a seam in the wall with a gauntlet-mounted scanner. "These readings, it's like bone, not metal. Keep your eyes peeled, Hawk." "Not time to play biologist," Jack grunted, wary of the disconcertingly dim corridors. His unease, however, wasn't just because of the unexpected nature of the alien ship. Despite years of training, simulations, and theorizing, there was an inherent sliver of fear coiling in his gut. Even now, he could picture his parents' faces the night he shipped out his mother's forced smile, and his father's eyes shadowed with the quiet terror of a parent sending their child off to war, especially this kind of war. A sharp hiss broke his thoughts, and Jack whirled around. Sarah Valkyrie Patel stood in a side corridor, thick smoke billowing from a deep gouge in its wall. "Something sprayed me," she rasped, "like acid, be careful." "Biological defenses? All right, Titans, keep your distance. Use low-power blasts." "This thing's alive," Jack relayed, his squad acknowledging with grim nods. They pressed on, navigating the labyrinthine, branching corridors. The ship's layout made no discernible sense, curving and twisting in ways that defied standard engineering principles. It pulsed beneath their feet, the air vibrating with a strange, low hum that made his skin crawl. "Sir, motion detectors are picking up something ahead." "Multiple contacts," Alex Rook Tanaka, their resident tech specialist, reported. "Numbers?" Jack's grip tightened on his blaster. "Hard to tell. Bio readings are all over the place," and Rook's voice held a hint of confusion. "Sir, they're small." "Define small, Rook?" "Like human-sized, maybe smaller, but the readings are chaotic," Rook confirmed. That sent a chill down Jack's spine. "Let's see what we're dealing with." "Formation Delta," he commanded. The Titans swiftly spread out, weapons trained on the junction ahead. As they rounded the corner, the source of the bio readings became horrifyingly clear. Squat, scuttling creatures, like a grotesque mockery of insects, swarmed down the corridor. Their mottled carapaces were a sickly green, their eyes bulging and multifaceted. They hissed and clicked, mandibles snapping with unsettling aggression. "Frag out," Jack yelled, lobbing a high-tech stun grenade. It detonated in a flash of light and a sonic boom, sending the creatures reeling in disorientation. The rest of the Titans followed suit, the staccato blasts of their rifles and hiss of energy weapons joining the symphony of the attack. The creatures shrieked and twitched, their bodies spasming, but they kept coming. Emily let out a frustrated shout. "They're flanking us. Too many." Just as Jack was about to order a retreat, a flicker of movement overhead drew his eye. Up high, clinging to the ceiling, was another of the creatures, but this one was different. Twice the size of its brethren, its segmented body was a deep, menacing crimson. But it was the pulsing, bulbous organ nestled between its clawed limbs that made Jack's blood freeze. Jack squeezed the trigger, sending a searing energy blast arcing towards the monstrous creature on the ceiling. It shrieked, the sound a shrill, alien note of pain, and its pulsing organ flared an angry violet before shrinking back with a wet sizzle. The creature plummeted to the ground, landing with a sickening crunch. The smaller ones surged forwards in a frenzy, but their attack was ragged and disorganized now, their leader clearly wounded. Now. Titans, push the advantage, Jack roared, their weapons flaring in the renewed assault. The bizarre insectoid aliens crumpled under the onslaught, their strange clicking replaced by wet, dying gurgles. Within moments, the corridor lay littered with smoking alien forms, their caustic fluids sizzling on the floor. The Titans regrouped, breathing hard, adrenaline still coursing through their veins. Status. Jack barked. Rook's got a few scrapes, but we're good, boss, Valkyrie confirmed, her voice tense. Readings on that big one, Rook? Jack asked, gesturing towards the creature's inert form. Rook crouched, scanner whirring. Biosigns fading. Interesting, it seems to have some kind of central nervous system, rudimentary telepathic link with the smaller ones. It was coordinating the swarm. Makes sense. Explains why they're so chaotic now, Emily remarked, peering cautiously at the creature's twitching carcass. Jack, Rook's voice was strained, there's something else here. What is it, Rook? Rook gestured to the creature's bulbous, pulsing organ. It was deflating, shrinking, and revealing a horrifying form nestled within. Sir, I don't think these were the aliens. His voice was barely a whisper. A humanoid figure, or what was left of one, was curled inside the organ, its skin a sickly gray, its limbs thin and emaciated. Its skull was oversized, bulbous, the eyes glazed and staring. Jack felt a cold wave of nausea sweep over him. Oh God. They're prisoners. Like cattle. Sarah's voice was thick with disgust. Trophies, test subjects, who knows what these things are capable of, Emily added, a dark note to her tone. Calm still fried? Jack asked, his mind racing. Unfortunately, yeah. Looks like whatever these things are, they're jamming long-range comms, Rook confirmed. The gravity of the situation was slowly sinking in. These creatures, the ship, it wasn't an invasion force, it was a prison, an experiment, a horror show. And those humanoid figures. His thoughts drifted back to his parents and how they'd looked when he left. Were those same expressions of fear mirrored now on the faces of millions of unsuspecting people across Earth? The thought that the aliens they'd armed themselves against, preyed against, might actually be the victims. It made his stomach churn. Jack, Emily said quietly, breaking his grim contemplation, we can't stay here. Whatever those things throw at us next, we're not equipped for it. We need to warn Earth. He hesitated, staring at the alien corpses. This changes everything, we need intel. Rook, get me everything you can on their tech, biology, everything. We'll exfiltrate, but we're not coming back empty-handed. The Titans moved with newfound grim determination, combing the alien ship for data. Their initial sense of victory vanished, replaced by a cold fire of resolve and a nauseating sense of unease. Along their grim search, they made further chilling discoveries: strange pods lining the walls, some empty, others still containing withered, decayed figures. Like cocoons. Sarah shuddered, her voice quiet. The implication was horrifying. These aliens, whatever they were transforming and breeding these prisoners in this living nightmare of a ship. Hours later, laden with salvaged alien tech and a vast trove of data they still couldn't fully decipher, the Titans reached the breach point. With one last, lingering look back at the horrors they were leaving behind, Jack keyed the remote detonator. A series of controlled explosions collapsed the corridors behind them. As they jettisoned through space back to the waiting human transport vessel, Jack couldn't shake the feeling of escaping a haunted house, relieved, but painfully aware there were rooms left unexplored, nightmares lurking around every corner. The transport ship brought them into Earth orbit, silent and foreboding against the familiar blue marble of their homeworld. Jack immediately requested an emergency debrief with the Planetary Defense Council, knowing the news he carried would land like a bomb. Within hours, Jack stood before the leaders of the Terran Alliance. The room pulsed with tense anticipation. Familiar faces from countless news feeds filled his vision: presidents, prime ministers, the people who had placed the fate of the human race in his hands. He didn't sugarcoat it. His report was blunt, concise, backed by the horrifying images Rook had captured inside the alien vessel. The room fell into shocked silence as the slideshow of alien bodies, emaciated prisoners, and strange pods ended. A heavy silence blanketed the debriefing room, the gravity of Jack's report hitting the world leaders with the weight of a meteor. It was the President of the United States who finally broke the stillness, her voice strained. Captain Bennet. Are you certain? Jack nodded grimly. As certain as we can be, Madam President. Whatever we fought, those aren't the architects of that ship. They're victims. A wave of unease swept through the room. Whispers rippled like an undercurrent, followed by a barrage of panicked questions: the origin of the aliens, their motives, the threat they represented. Jack raised a hand, silencing the chaotic theorizing. We don't know, not yet, he admitted, but we do have data. Their technology, biology, Rook and his team are analyzing it now. This changes everything. Changes everything? The usually composed Defense Minister of India echoed, her voice laced with disbelief. 20 years we've prepared for an invasion, and it turns out we were arming ourselves against the escapees of a cosmic horror? It seems so, Jack confirmed, the chilling reality of it washing over him again. What do you propose we do, Captain? This question came from the stoic Prime Minister of Japan. His face was a mask, but Jack could read the fear and uncertainty in his eyes. Jack took a deep, steadying breath. We stop preparing for a war, because that's not what's coming. We've seen what these creatures do to their prisoners. They experiment, modify, turn them into weapons. He looked each leader in the eye. Whatever those things are, they're the real enemy. And if we don't figure out how to stop them, Earth will be next on their list. Another wave of dread swept across the council. The initial, terrifying image of an overwhelming alien armada was crumbling. It was replaced by a faceless, perhaps even more insidious threat, a puppeteer in the shadows, pulling the horrifying strings of a monstrous interstellar experiment. We need to adapt, Jack pressed on. Our weapons, our tactics, we were gearing up to fight an army. These creatures aren't an army, they're a plague. He hesitated, carefully considering his next words. But we also need to understand the enemy. These prisoner aliens, the ones we saw, we might need them. The room erupted in protest. Collaborate with the aliens? The ones they'd just spent 2 decades preparing to fight? Jack had almost expected the response, but it still stung. It was the UN Secretary General, a woman whose wise eyes had seen more than her fair share of humanity's capacity for both compassion and destruction, who managed to quell the outcry. Order. Order, please. Captain Bennet, you believe these prisoner aliens can help us? I do, Jack responded firmly. Think of it from the enemy's perspective. If you're cruel enough to warp a sentient species into those. He gestured vaguely in the direction of the still lingering holographic images of the insectoid creatures. You'd be smart enough to build in weaknesses, blind spots in what you've created. The prisoners might know how to exploit them. His proposal was met with a mix of skeptical and thoughtful stares. The notion of cooperating with potential victims was so counterintuitive to everything they had planned for, and yet, Jack's grim logic was difficult to deny. So, this is your suggestion? The President of the United States clarified, her voice carefully controlled, shift our focus away from planetary defense, repurpose our strike teams into something different? And reach out to these prisoners on the alien vessel, hope for a kind of interstellar prison break? Yes, Madam President, Jack said, meeting her gaze steadily. We need to strike those things at the source, understand what makes them tick. And that means going back onto that ship, and this time, we're going in to rescue, not to fight. The council descended into an anxious debate. The sheer audacity of Jack's plan was almost surreal. After all this time, humanity wasn't just changing their tactics, they were flipping their entire mission statement. Yet, hard, horrifying evidence lingered those pods, the broken figures within. The gamble was huge, but so was the alternative. After what felt like an eternity, the Secretary General raised a silencing hand. The Council will take Captain Bennet's proposal under careful consideration, she announced, her voice echoing with the weight of a historic decision. In the meantime, we will refocus our resources. Analysis and adaptation are paramount. Dismissed. Jack filed out of the Grand Council chamber feeling a strange mix of adrenaline and exhaustion coursing through him. Their world had just been flipped upside down. The familiar lines of us versus them had been erased, smudged into a terrifying gray area where alliances and enemies might yet be redefined. In the weeks that followed, the world transformed at a dizzying pace. Top scientists pored over Rook's alien data, desperately attempting to understand a biology seemingly designed for war. Jack and the Titans, aided by newly formed infiltration squads of agile scientists and special forces operatives, prepared for a return to the monstrous, living ship. News channels became laboratories, their screens filled with dissections of bizarre alien physiology, their reports thick with strange terms like hyper-adaptability and bio-neural control. Yet, amidst the controlled chaos of scientific discovery, a simmering wave of fear gripped the populace. Some clung to the old narrative, refusing to believe the aliens weren't a monolithic threat. Conspiracy theories bloomed, fueled by whispers of manufactured evidence and shadow operations. Earth, even as it struggled to find its new footing, began to splinter. Jack watched this all unfold from his training facility, the Titans drilling relentlessly. Their new missions demanded a scalpel's precision, not the broadsword tactics of invasion defense. The enemy was inside the alien ship now. They needed to move in the shadows, adapt to the living labyrinth, rescue hostages, and learn. Every scenario the analysts devised was more nightmarish than the last. It's like those old horror movies, Emily had remarked grimly during a briefing, where the monsters are born inside the house itself. It was the eve of their return to the nightmare ship. Jack found himself drawn to the facility's observation deck, overlooking the bustling cityscape. He remembered how different his last view of Earth had been, how filled with a grim yet singular purpose. Now, he saw uncertainty flickering amidst the defiant lights of a defiant humanity. A figure joined him at the viewport. Sarah. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked, her usually sharp tone softened. "The mission briefings, they keep changing," Jack admitted. "So many unknowns, too many moving parts." "Remember when it was simple?" Sarah said with a wry smile. "Us versus them. Shoot the scary-looking aliens." They both chuckled, the sound hollow in the vast silence of the observation deck. "We can't go back, you know," Sarah continued, her voice barely a whisper. "Not to how it was before." Jack knew she was right. The revelation had fundamentally changed everything. The simplistic drive towards war was gone, replaced by a terrifyingly delicate mission. They weren't just going to fight, they were going to choose a side amidst an intergalactic horror show, and the consequences of choosing wrong were unthinkable. He glanced over at his old friend. The moonlight caught a flicker of moisture in her eyes. She wasn't just afraid of what awaited them out there, she was afraid of what awaited humanity itself. "Tomorrow, we walk into the Devil's Workshop," Jack finally said, his voice thick. "We just have to pray we come out with the right blueprints." Earth hung below them, its luminous form strangely fragile against the inky backdrop of space. In a matter of hours, the Titans would be plunging back into that monstrous ship, carrying the hopes and fears of an impossibly divided world. As Jack returned to his quarters, his comm device flickered to life. It was Rook, his voice a tense mix of fear and excitement. "Sir, you need to get down to the lab, right now. We've translated something." Rook paused, swallowed audibly. "It's not just prisoners on that ship, Jack. It's a distress call. And it's broadcasting into deep space." A chill ran down Jack's spine. The monstrous alien ship, the warped prisoners, the horrifying experiments, it was never a prison or a science vessel. It was a law. They were the bait, Earth was the trap, and whatever alien horrors were being summoned by that twisted beacon were on their way. The mission wasn't about rescue anymore. It was a race against time. If the Titans failed, they weren't just forfeiting a chance at survival, they would be handing their world an extinction notice. There would be no rewrites, no second takes. The first and perhaps final curtain call for humanity was about to begin, and the spotlight was fixed on him and his team. Jack took a deep breath, his eyes blazing with fierce determination. The enemy had made a catastrophic mistake. They'd underestimated humanity before, mistaking fear for docility. Now, Earth wasn't just going to fight back, they were going to fight back with a fury those alien monsters could never have conceived.